This right here is a real smartphone. It isn't some AI-generated slop. In fact, it was designed by a known brand, runs some version of Android, but never saw an official release and has a bit of a story to it. Let's jump right in. Now, specifically, this phone is called Project Gem, or better known as the Essential PH2. For those unfamiliar, Essential was an upstart smartphone brand founded in 2015 by the co-daddy of Android himself, Andy Rubin, who, sidebar, also left Google in 2014 for reasons that will sort of be relevant a little later on in the story. But basically, the ethos behind Essential, the company, was to make products that not only looked good, but also left an impression by, as the name implies, giving you the core essentials in a smartphone. We're talking timeless designs, built with durable, premium-feeling materials, paired with a straightforward, bloat-free software experience. And so, with this device, the PH2, Essential was looking to accomplish just that, aiming to strike a balance between the simplicity of a feature phone and the complexity of a smartphone. To be honest, in retrospect, this pragmatic approach was a novel concept in theory, but why didn't it work out? Well, part of the answer lies with its predecessor, the Essential PH1. Before we continue, I'd like to thank Opera for sponsoring this portion of the video. As someone who's constantly bouncing between research tabs, YouTube Studio, and monitoring social media for my channel, my browser setup can get absolutely chaotic, which is why I've been really impressed with Opera. It's like they designed it especially for people like us who live inside our browsers. There are a ton of really cool features here, such as the player, which lets you control Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, and other streaming services directly from the sidebar. You can even move the player outside and inside the browser window. Plus, you can pop videos out as floating modules. The split screen mode is also perfect for my workflow. Just drag a tab down and your browser splits in two. Great for keeping chats open while streaming or comparing product specs. In the way of organization, tab islands let you group related tabs and collapse or expand them as you need, while tab traces show you which tabs you've been using recently with a subtle visual cue, which can be super helpful if you got like 30 plus tabs open like I do. On top of all this, there's Aria. Hit Control / to ask questions in a handy command line, generate images, or analyze them without leaving your current page. No extra tabs, no interruptions to your workflow. Again, super neat. And as always, the dynamic themes are gorgeous with customizable animated backgrounds, UI colors, and even browser sound effects. If you would like to check out Opera for yourself, click the link in the description below, and huge thanks again to Opera for sponsoring this portion of the video. And now, back to the show. I actually have one right here, complete in box, and I gotta say, the PH1 is probably one of my favorite smartphone designs ever. Look at that. Probably the biggest exterior feature that I always associate with this device is the back, since it is made out of a very smooth ceramic. It not only feels good in the hands, but it's also quite resistant to dings and scratches, especially compared to the standard glass and aluminum typically found in flagships. So yeah, in a lot of ways, the aesthetic and physical design of the original Essential phone hold up even today. However, the PH1 wasn't just about looks. There were also flagship specs to back it up. Inside of here, we're talking about a Snapdragon. Woo! That's a different thing. We're talking about the Snapdragon 835, which was, at the time, top of the line, and it also even had a gorgeous looking display. Granted, it was LCD, but also interestingly featured an unconventional 19:10 aspect ratio and the slimmest bezels around. Also, there is a notch up top around the front-facing camera, which, fun fact, the PH1 is actually the first commercially available phone to include it before other brands followed suit. True to the Essential name, the PH1's core user experience revolved around stock Android, which was a blessing back in the day, away from the usual bloat brands would shove into their devices. The hope was that with these two pogo pins on the back, you would be able to add on a slew of cool accessories, Though at launch, the only one that was available was actually in this box, a 360 camera attachment. All we gotta do is line up the pins, sits on with a magnet, and there we go. We have a blue light confirming that it is connected to the phone, and I guess we just open up the camera app. It keeps making this high-pitched whine, and I don't know why. Whoa, there we go, look at that. 360 cam, we can move it around. Woo! I mean, the image quality, not particularly great, especially compared to today's 360 cameras, but wow, that is, yeah, I could have a little fun with this. Of course, 360 itself is sort of a gimmick, but it's not really surprising that a company like Essential wanted to capitalize, since platforms such as YouTube were trying to get 360 videos off the ground at around the same time. All of this amounted to a phone that was quite well received by critics, with the consensus being that it was a very good first attempt at a flagship phone from an upstart company. But sadly, these efforts weren't fruitful enough for Essential to meet their sales targets, and a lot of this was because this phone did come with its fair share of drawbacks. Perhaps the biggest pain point that reviewers found was lackluster camera performance compared to the competition. With a flagship price of $700 in 2017, users simply expected more. Beyond that, people weren't quite used to the notch sitting atop the screen, and some reviewers were left scratching their heads on why this device running flagship level silicon would see stutters and lagging from time to time. It would seem that all of these little things started to add up, which ultimately led to some cracks forming in this company's rather confident charade. A few months following the launch of the PH1, Essential would ultimately make some dire moves to try to sell phones, such as lowering the price by $200 to $499, which did make it more enticing. In fact, I believe this is when Austin bought ours for the main channel back in 2018. They would even go as far as accommodating the early birds that had bought this phone at the full $700 price tag, giving them a $200 credit to either grab this 360 cam attachment for free, which yes, this phone did not come with that, or you could use the $200 credit to buy another Essential phone, though obviously that might have been a bit of a stretch. By the end of its run, Essential had said that the PH1 had made sales in the 6-digit range, though analysts estimate that it had just barely met that threshold at 150,000 units. Now, for context, one of its closest competitors, the original Google Pixel, sold around 1 million units in that same time frame. And that phone wasn't quite the poster child of sales either. Though, of course, the difference here being that Google probably had a bit more cash to burn on experimentation. But even still, despite this company's uneventful start, behind the scenes at Essential, they were still working on another phone. This one called Project Gem, aka the Essential PH2. What makes the PH2 unique is obviously this narrow candy bar style form factor that's kind of reminiscent of a TV remote. Just like the PH1 that came before it, it feels insanely high quality in the hands, more than probably what comes across on camera. The back of it is entirely made out of glass, and it's all one piece, meaning it's really smooth and very comfortable to hold, albeit maybe a bit slippery. Who knows what the durability of this thing could be, but I'm not about to find out. But yeah, regardless, it is a very pretty looking phone. And there was even going to be a bunch of different colorways aside from this dark blue one. There is also a dimple on the back, presumably for a fingerprint reader to unlock the phone, but sadly, it's not operational for this unit. Now, as far as software goes, the PH2 was slated to run a sort of highly customized version of Android for its uniquely shaped display. However, sadly, this prototype unit does not have this. Rather, we have a very basic build of Android, primarily for debugging and hardware testing purposes, which is a shame because the Project Gem interface genuinely seemed cool from what we're able to gather about it online. Centered around both cards and widgets, the UX here aimed to strike a sort of balance between the simplicity of an old-school feature phone with the connectivity of a smartphone, such that users would be able to curb their usage and reliance on the internet, but in a way that's realistic for current day sensibilities. So in theory, you'd be able to run Spotify, use maps, text, and take pictures. In fact, the photos on here, even with this build of Android and the camera built in, don't look too bad out the rear. And there is a cutout for the front-facing camera, but that one kind of looks a little, yeah. The raw build of Android running on this prototype doesn't even have the Google Play Store. Otherwise, I would have tried a few more things, though realistically, maybe with a bit more effort, I could probably sideload apps on here. And the thing is, the hardware inside isn't even too bad either. It has a Snapdragon 830, which was mid-range for the time when this was made, but honestly, that's probably all you'd need for a phone like this. Even though there isn't a whole lot that I can do with this particular example of the PH2, this phone did genuinely seem like a pretty cool idea, at least in theory. And I guess the spirit of it sort of lives on in devices such as the Palm phone and the Light phone, which has seen a few generations. But man, at least for me personally, this form factor is quite literally everything. It's unique, easy to hold, pocketable. Sadly for the Essential brand, it just didn't work out long enough for them to see the PH2 through. I'd love to see another brand do something similar to this in the future. But let me know, what do you think of Essential Phone in the comments below? And otherwise, thanks for watching this video on Denki channel.